Hi guys, it's Jaden, and today we're going to talk about chapters 10 to 13 in the Penderwicks summer tale of 4 sisters, 2 rabbits, and a very interesting boy. Even though you might just have the Penderwicks, but there is a summer tale, okay? But a summer tale of 4 sisters, 2 rabbits, and a very interesting boy. You will also see this, so mostly, at least on my copy. So this is a National Book Award winner and this book is by Jan Bursell. Let's start. So, did you think that after the birthday party, it would be a little awkward between Jeffrey and the 4 Penderwick sisters? And what about Jeffrey? How do you think that he felt about all this, with Dexter and Pensy? And also, Mrs. Tifton, right? Now Mrs. Tifton is getting more snooty and mean because now the garden club competition is coming up. If you had been the Penderwick sisters, how would you have reacted? And Batty feared Mrs. Tifton. Would you be scared of Mrs. Tifton? Let's say if you think back to when you are 4 years old. And do you agree that the flowers died when Mrs. Tifton walked by? I think so. But anyway, so Batty wanted to go to see the rabbits, but of course Rosalind was like, no way. And would you rather? And if you were, let's say that do you like reading about Civil War generals, writing a letter to your best friend, and also making brownies? Or would you like to see very cute rabbits? Both are very appealing, but so I just wanted to ask you that. But anyway, do you think that Yaz and Carla will feel abandoned if Batty does not come, or do you think that they can stand one day? And Jane and Sky and also Jeffrey and Jeffrey were shooting targets at a Dexter target. Wasn't that very funny? What did you think of that? Do you think that it should have been right for Batty to sneak away to Yaz and Carla? And then, of course, Mrs. Tifton comes. So annoying. Mrs. Tifton is mean to Batty, right? How would you have responded if you were up in Batty and you heard all those things like, tapping his head, Miss Dexter tapping his head like she was crazy, and if Mrs. Tifton thought that maybe he was dead, so she began to shout like, "Can you hear me?" Right? I did not like that. Did you? But anyway, then Yaz escapes, right? How did you feel like that? How did you feel when that did? And she yelled, "Yes, no!" Right? Which is actually yes, no. So it'll be yes, no, right? And then but of course, Mrs. Tifton was like, when she does speak, she doesn't really make any sense. But anyway, but how would you feel if you had been Batty? But anyway, now Rosalind was just going to Cagney's so that she could do the brownies, to give the brownies, and she assured herself that her father also liked brownies, and because Cagney also liked brownies, and that she would not be as a lowlife to get to a man's heart with food through his stomach. There's an old saying about that. Actually, if you were a boy, let's say, but this counts for boys and girls too. If you had been the other guy, okay, and you really like this, and you had a really big crush on the other guy or the other person, then would you cook so that you could impress that person. Some people wouldn't, some people would. But anyway, so of course Rosalind wants to avoid Mrs. Tifton and Dexter. Well, too bad for her. She got a really big face full of Mrs. Tifton and Dexter. Do you think that it was right for Rosalind to pick one of the lilies? But why did Mrs. Tifton have to act so mean about it? And Rosalind replied by saying sorry. Would you say sorry, or would you be rebellious and begin to throw dirt at Mrs. Tifton's skirt so she would scream? But also, and then Mrs. Tifton, the way to man's heart is through the stomach, right, or something like that. And Mrs. Tifton is like, remind me to bake for you sometime, Dexter. And then of course he has to say, you already have my heart, darling. I didn't like that part. Did you? But then Rosalind found out that Batty was at at Candy's apartment. Uh-oh. How did you feel up in Rosalind? Would you be panicking, or would you be like, hey, Batty couldn't have done much? How would you be? But anyway, the rabbits were gone. At least Yaz. Uh-oh. But anyway, Jane was actually thinking about the Sabrina Starbuck as she, was aiming her arrow at the Dexter target. Do you like writing? Just a quick question. And also then and then Hound got on the loose. So how would you feel if you had been Jane, Sky, and Jeffrey? And then they meet Rosalind, and Rosalind's like, wait, the rabbits are gone. The rabbits Yaz is gone. And I think that Batty did that to them. And then there's also that, and now two of them are escaping. How do you think the Penderwicks sisters felt? Well, it does sort of show they were panicking and all that, but how did you feel about that? But finally they found Yaz, right? But then suddenly Hound came in, right? Hound. Did you think that, what did you think that Hound was gonna do to Yaz? And then Mrs. Tifton comes up. It was already a big disaster. Now it's a huge, an enormous disaster, right? So, do you even sympathize a little to Mrs. Tifton? Because her flowers were getting destroyed. But still, do you sympathize with her? But luckily, Hound doesn't kill Yaz, right? Awesome, right? Because instead, he just brings Yaz, right, to Rosalind. If Yaz had been dead, how do you think that Rosalind would have faced the consequences with Cagney? Do you think that she would just hide her face and never look at Cagney again? What do you think would happen? And what about Cagney? How do you think that that he would feel about all this? But then they realized, where's Batty? Oh man. So basically, they just finished a disaster. Two problems are solved. Hound is back, and Yaz is going back. But then But Mrs. Tifton still hasn't solved the problem with Mrs. Tifton. So they've barely come out of another disaster, and they're still in the Mrs. Tifton disaster when they discover about Batty. So then they're plunged into another disaster. So it's like this: disaster number 1, disaster number 2. In the middle, there's a disaster number 1 to 2. In the middle, okay? So they didn't have the best day that day, but unfortunately, they could do nothing about that. But anyway, yes, if you had been Batty, would you have walked all the way back to your home? Or do you think, and if you were 4 years old, would you do that? Because you need to think about Batty's point of view. And she's 4 years old. But also, do you think that is foolish about Batty going home? And everyone has searched for her, which means she has gone out, right? And so now they use Hound as a track dog. Do you think that it's realistic that a dog that has never tracked can suddenly track? And or do you think that that Hound could do that? And then Hound came along, right? But I also wanted to point out that she was not crossing the road. She came upon a road, right? Well, I mean, she already ran away. Why is she not crossing the road? And it was a little ironic in my opinion. How about you? And also, I also wanted to she was trying to lead Hound, of course, into the road, but Hound was staying firm, so she was like, "Oh, okay," and she went in, and she just closed her eyes and went in, and of course, that had to be when the car came into view. So, do you think that Batty could have gone all the way to the end of the road, to the other side of the road? Actually, I mean, it depends on what kind of road you're actually driving on. I mean, you're running on. Like, for example, the road right over there actually is only a 2-lane road. Well, it's not. It doesn't even have any 2 lanes. It's just, just cars go on it, right? It's a regular neighborhood road. You could probably, survive that. But since it's in the country, it's not gonna be like enormous, right? I mean, like the highway, it's not gonna be a highway, or like the road won't be enormous, right? It'll just be like maybe a 2-lane road, 3-4-lane road at most. But I think that's pretty unrealistic, because then that would be a highway actually. So 2-lane road at best, right? Batty could probably have survived that. But if the bend was really close to where Batty was, okay, then Batty's really in trouble. And if the speed limit was like 60 miles an hour, which I guess that wouldn't really happen if it was out of a highway, but let's just say it was 60 miles per hour. I mean, and Batty's a little kid, and it might be on the opposite lane, so when she gets here, then it will be like right here, and when she gets here, well, right when she's right over here, well, like basically, if it's on the opposite lane and then she goes all the way to the middle, then it would already be here. And if she tries to go over here, probably boom, it will crash, right? But then who comes as the hero, right? Actually, Jane actually described it as the jaws of death. Do you think that would count as the jaws of death? And Jeffrey, he saved Batty, right? How do you think that Mr. Penderwicks felt to Jeffrey then? Jeffrey just saved Batty from probably death, right? So, and then Mr. Penderwick, like in all the midst of this happiness, right? So now, Hound and Yaz were already, Hound and Yaz were found a long time ago, and now Batty's also found. So everything is happy, and they're like celebrating and telling stories, and then suddenly Mr. Penderwick drops the bomb. Mrs. Tifton called me this afternoon. Uh-oh. Okay. So, but anyway, what did you think of Mrs. Tifton accusing Mr. Penderwick of not having enough control over the girls? How do you think the girls felt, and how do you think that Mr. Penderwick felt about that? And also, do you think that the girls are a bad influence over Jeffrey? And I also wanted to ask you about what was it? About how if someone saves somebody else, then they own a part of their soul. And Sky was like, what the heck would Jeffrey do with Batty's soul, right? Because like Jane has said, that's kind of romantic. Well, do you agree with that? And then Batty said he could marry me. Do you think first of all, I just wanted to ask you if you're an ick with romance or if you like romance. And then, do you think that it's realistic that Batty will marry Jeffrey? Okay. Chapter 12. Sir Barnaby Pattern. Okay, so after this, they were very, very, very nice, right? For a long time. So now they were like, and they were out of trouble. And then the day of the garden club came. And let's just say it went horribly. And that was an understatement, okay? Yeah, a huge understatement. So let's start. What did you think of Pensy after you read the pamphlet? And this might be different for everybody because if you want to be a soldier, then that's great. But how do you think that Jeffrey felt about that pamphlet? And then they began to play soccer, right? And do you like soccer? Quick question. And then Mick Hart came in. Who is Mick Hart? Or at least I'll just say Mick Hart is Jane's imaginary soccer player from Manchester, England, right? Do you like this character Mick Hart? I mean, like Mick Hart's like fishhead, knave, gooseberry louse, silly get, and then there was, of course, Mrs. Tifton, right, and the garden club, and they were all like, and Jane was screaming, and like, and they had knocked over this, what was it, a urn, I think, right? Did you feel a little sympathetic to Mrs. Tifton right then? And also, why do you think that Sir Barnaby Pattern and the rest of the garden club was almost laughing? And also, how did you think that Jane and Sky felt at that moment when Mrs. Tifton was like so angry and her face was red and she looked like she was gonna explode? And also, I just also wanted to ask you so Sky, did you think, if you had been Sky and Jane, would you have gone up the ladder, or do you still think that it's pretty dangerous to climb up the ladder to Jeffrey, right? And do you think that there's a bigger chance that Jeffrey is going to Pensy now? Is going to Pensy sooner because of all this? And do you think that Mrs. Tifton's reaction was reasonable or unreasonable? Okay, chapter 13, the piano lesson. Okay, so, do you think that music is hard, and do you like music? Just quick question. And also, when Batty was asking if she could play with some things, did you expect that Batty was gonna make some trouble? And then Sky began tickling, right? And there was a lot of tickling, and then they began to wrestle, and then began to pummel each other. And then Mrs. Tifton came in. How do you think that Mrs. Tifton felt about all this? And she actually expresses this, right? She begins to shout, and then to make things worse, there is Batty, and she made this whole fort, right? Wow. Did you think that was smart of Batty to do this? Sky goes away, right? But then she begins to listen. And if you had heard all that about your sisters and your mother, how do you think that she really felt? And if you had been Sky, how would you have felt too? And how would you have reacted to this? And do you think that and has your disliking of Mrs. Tifton grown because of this, or what do you think about this? And I just also wanted to ask you about one last question, and it's this: Mrs. Tifton, do you think that it was good that she got second place in the garden competition? But anyway, hope that you had an awesome session with me. Oh yeah, I also forgot to say what I always say, and you'll soon know this by heart. At the end of each session, I will ask you, what was your favorite part in all of this? What's your favorite part so far? How do you like the book so far? And also, what do you predict is going to happen next? Because right now, we don't really know, right? What do you think? What do you think? But anyway, hope you have an awesome day, and I hope that you also you enjoy your time with me today.